A young mechanic in 2023 prees up the warped trunk lining of a decommissioned 1984 police cruiser and discovers a taped envelope marked in red ink, "They kept the cash. I kept this." Inside, a grainy photo captures 3 narcotics officers counting stacks of money in that cruiser's trunk, evidence that a 900 bust went inexplicably missing from official records. May 12, 1984, 2:13 a.m. The city lay draped in humidity and hush, its streets slick from an afternoon thunderstorm that refused to break the southern heat. In a precinct office 2 miles north of downtown, officers James "Jim" Thornton, Earl McKinney, and Raul Santiago gathered around a battered wooden table. A single desk lamp cast elongated shadows across grainy photographs of men who'd slipped in and out of the city's heroin circuit. Thornton, a veteran of 8 years on narcotics, thumbed through the files with deliberate calm. "These coordinates," he said, pointing to a hand-drawn map, "are our best lead on Carter's operation." Carter, a low-level supplier with ties to Atlanta, had slipped through their grasp twice in the past 6 months. The stakes felt higher now. Rumors circulated of a major shipment arriving that night, enough to net hundreds of thousands in street value. McKinney, 28 and recently promoted, studied the mugshots without blinking. His voice was low, practiced. "We move in. Secure the perimeter. Thornton and Santiago sweep the house. I'll watch the backyard exit." Outside, the thunderstorm had let up, but the air crackled with anticipation. At 3:02 a.m., the unmarked Ford Ltd Unit 413 rolled out. Its engine purred, lights off, the city's glow reflecting off its hood. Inside the cruiser, Thornton's voice crackled over the radio. "Neighbors asleep. No civilians within 100 meters. We're green." They cut power to the street, slipped down rain-glazed pavement, and surrounded the beige stucco house on Woodland Avenue. McKinney found an open window. Santiago slipped through, his flashlight beam flickering across walls streaked with peeling wallpaper. Thornton followed, gun drawn, announcing, "Police." 3 muffled footsteps, then a door slammed as the suspects surrendered. By 3:27 a.m., the 3 men were cuffed on the front lawn, faces illuminated by the cruiser's headlights. Inside the house, overturned furniture lay under plastic tarps. On a folding table sat stacks of bundled bills, each secured with rubber bands. Thornton counted aloud in even tones. 20 stacks on the left, another 30 on the right bundles, so thick the table dipped at its center. When Thornton radioed dispatch, he reported, "Suspected heroin, 3 in custody, cash recovered, estimate $900,000. Outside, the rain began again, as if nature too acknowledged the weight of that moment. The officers loaded the cash into sealed evidence bags, each tagged and signed. Unseen by them, the cruiser's trunk liner stretched taut, ready to bear witness to a haul destined to disappear into silence. 3:42 a.m. Unit 413 eased onto Main Street, its engine purring beneath the hush of dawn. In the front passenger seat, Officer Thornton held a receipt stub, their only paper trailed tailing 3 suspects, a small bag of powdered heroin, and an estimated cash total of $900. He ran a gloved finger down the ledger's column, where a clerk's scrawl matched the number Thornton had radioed moments before. Back at headquarters, the evidence room lay behind a heavy steel door, its combination lock clicking in practiced arcs. Inside, Sergeant Paula Jennings flicked on a single overhead light, illuminating rows of gray metal lockers. Thornton and McKinney carried the sealed evidence bags inside, stepping around shelves of case files bound in twine. Each bag bore a yellow tag, Case 84-237. Jennings checked the stub against the manifest, ticking off items with clinical precision. But when she reached cash $900, her pen paused, hesitated, then crossed out the figure with a single, neat line. Beneath it, in a different hand, she wrote, 70. Silent among the hum of the fluorescent bulb, no one spoke. A single Polaroid lay discarded on the counter, edges curled. Officers huddled around the trunk of Unit 413, counting bills. The timestamp read May 12, 84, 3:29 a.m. Newspaper headlines that afternoon blazed across the city's front pages. Nearly 1 million seized in major heroin bust. Midnight raid yields, $900K in cash. 3 arrested. But those articles would be the last appearance of 900 in any official archive. A later photocopy of the precinct's evidence, log-stamped, case closed and redacted, listed only 70 cash under evidence recovered. The discrepancy went unremarked, filed away in a folder labeled Clerical Corrections. Inside the district attorney's office, Assistant DA Ruth Hartley glanced at the docket for case 84-237. Under evidence received, the entry read simply $70K USD. No notation flagged a missing, 830. When she queried Detective Thornton about the change 2 days later, he offered only a brief shrug. Paperwork mix-up. Happens. And with that, the office moved on to more pressing matters. Meanwhile, the 3 suspects, John Walker, Eddie Patton, and Luis Alvarez, in holding cells, unaware of the vanished cash. Their court appearance featured photographs of the seized drugs and the smaller sum of money. Defense attorneys argued the discrepancy undermined the prosecution's credibility, but the judge accepted the DA's amended evidence list without hesitation. By dusk on May 13, the only record of 900 remained the faded ink of Thornton's radio log and the morning headlines buried in microfilm archives. Unit 413, its trunk once heavy with bundles, now carried only the echo of what had been and a secret stitched behind its lining, waiting nearly 4 decades to resurface. May 14, 1984, 9:17 a.m. The precinct's back office was quiet save for the steady hum of the filing cabinet's motorized rollers. A lone clerk, Deputy Evidence Custodian Warren Fields, sat before a stack of case folders, his fingers tracing each typed line. He reached case 84-237, paused at the entry for cash 900, and sighed. His supervisor's memo lay atop the folder. Reduce amount to match vault deposit. See Sergeant Jennings. Fields intercepted the original evidence, slipped it into a manila envelope marked Clerical Corrections. He replaced it with a revised slip, handwritten in neat cursive, cash 70. No stamp indicated a review, no initials beside the correction. The envelope hand, the missing 830, joined dozens of other paperwork amendments in a locked drawer. By noon, the district attorney's office had forwarded its case package to the courthouse. Assistant DA Ruth Hartley scanned the bundle, lab results, arrest reports, and a single cash count. When she spotted only 70 listed under recovered assets, she underlined it in red. 2 lines below, her note read, confirmed with Thornton paperwork error, no further action. She stamped the docket, accepted, and passed the file along. Back at Internal Affairs, Captain Robert Ellington waved off any inquiry. In his cramped office, he stacked the original raid logs beside a cup of cold coffee. He tapped the folded memo from Sergeant Jennings. See, clerical error, scrawled in her block letters, and closed the drawer. Not worth the paper, he muttered. Let it go. No formal inquiry was recorded. No one interviewed the officers beyond a perfunctory nod at roll call. Thornton, McKinney, and Santiago continued their shifts without interruption. Each maintained an unblemished record. No disciplinary notes, no change in assignment, no whispers at the station. The department's annual report for 1984 even lauded Unit 413's handlers for exemplary evidence processing. A line printed in the same brochure that proclaimed a department committed to integrity. Meanwhile, the 3 suspects awaited trial. Their attorneys moved to suppress all cash evidence, citing chain of custody concerns. Judge Harold Pruitt listened to the arguments, but ruled that the amended log sufficed. We proceed on what's before the court, he declared, and the trial pushed forward. By the time the jury convicted Walker, Patton, and Alvarez of possession and distribution, the notion of a clerical error had become a footnote in closing arguments. In the prosecutor's summation, the phrase echoed but carried no weight, a slip of the pen, nothing more. Outside the courthouse, shuttered cameras captured the defendants led away, and captured, too, the fleeting glance between Thornton and Jennings as they exited, their secret intact. Decades later, those markdowns in a forgotten drawer would prove the only trace of the missing money in absence more telling than any admission of guilt. June 3, 1985, 7:48 a.m. Police Maintenance Division, Fleet Yard, 2. The faded blue and white paint of Unit 413 bore fresh streaks of mud along its rocker panels, evidence of one last high-speed chase down Ridgeview Boulevard. Inside the impound lot, mechanics clustered around the cruiser's open hood, its radiator fractured, mounting brackets torn. A grease-smudged report lay on the fender. Pursuit damage, front-end collision at unknown suspect vehicle, unit non-operational. No reference to the May 1984 raid appeared. Lieutenant Harvey Pollard signed the decommission order without pause. "Parts roster complete," he murmured, tapping the form. The line marked "Incident Report Required" remained blank. Pollard folded the order and handed it to Sergeant Jennings. She tucked it into her file drawer, alongside the clerical correction envelope from the previous year. Neither document would see daylight again. By noon, Unit 413 sat under a tarp in Bay 4, alongside 3 retired patrol cars. In the lot's back corner, the cruiser's trunk still held its factory spare tire, though archival rumors suggested another secret occupant weeks earlier. A garage foreman keyed a computer entry. Unit 413, salvage inventory. Status, decommissioned. The software auto-generated a sale notice to Fleet Disposal Services, a private contractor based outside Baton Rouge. August 15, 1985, 9:02 a.m. Fleet Disposal Services, private impound lot. Under a blistering sun, grizzled tow trucks lined up as Fleet Disposal's yard manager, Louise Carver, inspected the latest acquisition. She noted the cruiser's intact siren, undented rooflight bar, and unbroken dashboard radiator finds in decommissioned units. An invoice stamped "Paid" authorized the transfer. Lot 17, Vehicle ID 413, Buyer J.M. Auctions. That evening, a rotund flatbed rumbled away with Unit 413 strapped to its bed. Carver watched until the dust settled, then flipped through her ledger. No notes indicated damage beyond the radiator or any unusual contents. The cruiser would soon appear at auction, paint chipped, police decals half peeled, odometer frozen, at 120,347 miles. September 1985, May 2023. For nearly 4 decades, Unit 413 passed through at least 3 owners: a rural tow operator, a car restoration hobbyist, and finally a regional wrecking yard outside Baton Rouge. Each time, paperwork recorded only the visible damage and mileage. The trunk liner underwent replacement's first violet carpet in the early 90s, then generic black marine vinyl, but no mechanic ever peeled back its folds to reveal what lay beneath. By 2023, the cruiser's body sagged on rusted springs. Its engine bay housed a worn vate missing 2 spark plugs. Decals bled into the primer coat. Impounded under the shell company, Gillespie Salvage LLC, it waited in a corner of the yard, destined for scrap until Elise Bernard spotted it, a relic of long-ago days when Unit 413 carried something far more valuable than metal and paint. In silence, the cruiser's final chapter began not in a station garage or auction house, but beneath a hood open to the sky, its secrets bound by staples and a decades-old promise of hidden truth. October 17, 2004, 2 p.m. In a modest ranch house on the fringe of the city, Ron Duvall sat at a desk illuminated by a single green-shaded lamp. Now 62, Duvall had been a detective on the night of the 1984 raid, though he'd left narcotics 2 decades earlier. His hands, once steady, trembled slightly as he opened a worn, leather-bound notebook, edges frayed. Inside lay meticulously copied fragments of evidence logs, photocopies of that Polaroid, and side-by-side prints of newspaper clippings claiming a 900 haul. Duvall's wife, Marlene, stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "It's late," she whispered. He didn't look up. He rarely did. For 20 years he'd revisited the night Carter's house fell silent under their raid, haunted by the gap between what they reported and what arrived in the vault. He traced his finger over a faded ink annotation. Only 70? 0 booked. Why? In his mind, he replayed the sequence: Thornton's clipped radio report, Jennings' silent correction, the cashier's nod at the DA's office. Each replay deepened the knot in his chest. He'd raised questions in hushed conversations over beers, but fellow officers waved him off. Paperwork snafus, just clerical noise. November 2, 2004, 2:29 a.m. Duvall sat in his car outside the old precinct, engine idling. His former partner, Earl McKinney, had agreed to meet him for coffee and Olive Branch Overture after years of silence. Inside the precinct's empty lobby, they spoke in low tones over styrofoam cups. McKinney's eyes flicked to the evidence vault door before he said, "We all got our careers to think about, Ron. You're stirring ghosts." "I'm not forgetting what's right," Duvall replied quietly. He slid across a photocopy of the stamped Clerical corrections envelope. "We left 830, 0 unaccounted for. Someone had to notice." McKinney shook his head, drained his coffee. "Let it stay buried." December 15, 2004, 10:14 p.m. Back home, Duvall withdrew a small wooden box from beneath his bed. Inside lay a single, unmarked envelope, yellowed with age. It contained the torn corner of a money bag stamped Evidence Case 84-237. He caressed it as though it were a talisman. At the doorway, Marlene placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's killing you," she said softly. He closed the box and looked at her. "I keep thinking if I speak up, I'll lose everything: my pension, my reputation. But if I stay silent, I lose myself." In the silent room, the past felt present. Duvall reached for his notebook once more, pen poised above a blank page. Outside, the night held its breathin' old detective's final vigil for the money that vanished and the truth he refused to abandon. Under the same hush of a new investigation, a different pair of hands would soon pry open the trunk of Unit 413, uncovering the evidence Duvall had preserved only in memory. June 7, 2023, 8:15 a.m. The morning sun slanted across the rows of silent hulks at Lafayette Auto Salvage, illuminating peeling factory decals and corroded fenders. Elise Bernard, 26 and newly hired, rounded the corner of Bay C, her oil-stained gloves tucked into her back pocket. She carried a clipboard with that day's pull list starter motors, brake drums, a working alternator and a handheld radio crackling with her supervisor's voice. "Bernard, we've got a heavy project for you," called Foreman Doug Dillard over the roar of a tow rig. "Unit 413, down by the east wall." Elise paused. She'd read the lot sheet. A 1980 Ford Ltd, formerly police spec, now registered to Gillespie Salvage LLC. No specific notes beyond intact body, parts intact. Her heart flickered at the ghost of its past life. Police cars rarely made it this far intact. She checked the VIN etched on the windshield frame. Ends in 413. This was it. At 8:23 a.m., she slid under the tarp. The cruiser's red-blue light bar lay half buried in rusted parts. The grill badge was scratched but legible. Ford Police Interceptor. She ran her hand along the door seam. Chips of blue paint revealed white primer beneath. Inside, the odometer read 120,347 miles, the same number she'd seen on the auction sheet. Elise ducked inside the driver's side, careful not to tear her coveralls. The bench seat upholstery was cracked, its spring coils jutting through torn vinyl. She snapped photos with her phone. Engine bay, interior panels, door jambs. Every salvageable component had to be documented before removal. As she stepped through her checklisty rod ends, ball joints, headlight housing gaze drifted to the trunk. She wiped a hand across the lid's edge, unsettling a layer of dust that revealed staples along the lip. The lining looked newish, out of place next to faded carpet elsewhere. She frowned, running a fingertip along one staple that protruded unevenly. "Odd," she murmured, pressing the button on her radio. "Doug, you ever seen trunk liners stapled like this? Doesn't match factory work." A crackle of static answered. "Can't say I have. You got eyes on something weird?" Elise climbed down and circled to the rear. She inspected each seam-wrong staples, inconsistent spacing, slightly frayed edges. Under a weather-worn taillight, she found a single stainless staple that gleamed against rust. Her mechanic's instinct nudged. This wasn't just to replace worn lining. Someone had hidden something here. She noted the anomaly on her clipboard under Additional Observations and closed the trunk. The liner bounced back with a hollow thud, like a promise of secrets beneath. By 8:47 a.m., Elise had finished her initial survey and radioed the foreman for a second set of hands. The rest of the yard's noise faded as she turned back to Unit 413, realizing she'd uncovered more than just a parts car. Under that trunk lining lay the residue of almost 4 decades of silence, and tonight she would pry it open. Her first glimpse under the transplanted carpet would reveal a taped envelopian unspoken confession stuck to the floor of a decommissioned cruiser. June 7, 2023, 9:12. Elise knelt at the rear of Unit 413, gloves pried off to keep her hands nimble. She pressed a flashlight beam into the narrow gap between the trunk lid and the body, illuminating a half-inch of irregular staples. Each pin looked hammered in by handsome bent, some barely holding the frayed edge of faded black vinyl against the trunk's metal floor. She located the loosest staple, angling a flathead screwdriver beneath its head. The metal resisted, catching at the vinyl. She jiggled the blade, careful not to tear the lining. With a sudden pop, the staple gave way, and the liner curled upward like a tired eyelid. Dirt and detritus spilled onto the bumper in a fine gray dust. Her breath caught. Beneath the liner, the floor pan bore fresh scratches too recent for the decades-old rust elsewhere. A strip of clear packing tape, yellowed at the edges, ran diagonally across the metal. Its surface was crisscrossed with fine cracks, betraying its age, and at its center lay a small, folded envelope stamped shut. Elise sat back on her heels, heart thudding. She retrieved nitrile gloves from her back pocket and knitted them on. The tape's adhesive still clung stubbornly. She ran her thumbnail along one corner, easing it free. The envelope brown, roughly cut from a larger sheet, bore a single handwritten line in red ink. "They kept the cash. I kept this." The handwriting was precise yet urgent. Letters slanted, as though written in haste. Elise's pulse quickened. She tapped a photo of the message and the brittle tape for documentation, careful to capture every crease. Then, kneeling over the trunk's hollow expanse, she slid a gloved fingertip along the envelope's flap. Inside was not paper, but a thin Polaroid wrapped in wax paper. The sight of images warped by time and moisture made her chest tighten. She held the envelope by its lower corner, wary of contaminating evidence. Beneath, the metal floor bore a faint outline where the photo had rested for decades, a ghostly rectangle free of grime. She lifted the Polaroid, its surface dull. Under the wax paper, the image showed 3 men in police uniforms, gloves on their hands, leaning into the trunk of Unit 413. Bundles of cash lay spread across the spare tire well. A red timestamp in the corner read, May 12, 84, 3:29 a.m. Elise exhaled, quiet release of tension. Every scrap of her training told her this was the discovery that changes everything. She tucked the Polaroid and its envelope into an evidence bag, sealing it with a single strip of numbered tape. Then she sat back against the cruiser's bumper, the morning sun suddenly too bright, the world too loud. For the first time since the yard foreman pointed her to Unit 413, Elise understood the weight she carried, a physical link to a story that decades of paperwork had tried to bury. And here, in the hollow belly of a rusted cruiser, the past refused to stay silent. June 7, 2023, 9:35 a.m. The envelope's red scrawl sat stark against the yellowed paper. They kept the cash. I kept this. Elise Bernard traced each letter with the tip of her gloved finger, as though deciphering a code left decades ago. The simple sentence carried the weight of every unasked question: who exactly was they, and why shield one's own confession in a rusted trunk? She laid the Polaroid flat on her clipboard and shone her flashlight over its glossy surface. In the dim trunk space, the photograph's contrast jumped dark uniforms against bands of cash bundled in twine. One figure, shoulders squared, held a thick stack aloft, as if weighing its worth. The timestamp in the corner, May 12/84, 3:29 a.m. matched the hour on Thornton's radio log. Elise snapped macro shots of the note and photo, careful to preserve every crease and fingerprint ridge. Each image file carried an auto-tagged timestamp in her camera app. Then she secured both items in a numbered evidence bag, attached her chain of custody tag, and radioed Foreman Doug Dillard. "Doug, I've got something big. Request secure transport of Unit 413 to the back lot." Evidence protocol in effect. A minute later, a second technician arrived in a white lab coat from the scrapyard's newly minted Special Projects Unit. Elise guided him through her findings: trunk liner irregularities, the taped envelope, the Polaroid's contents. He nodded, eyebrows knit, and retrieved a wooden evidence crate from his truck. Together, they lifted the bagged items into the crate, sealing it with tamper-evident tape and logging serial numbers in the salvage yard's digital registry. Back at the yard office, Elise logged into her personal email and composed her note to investigative journalist Marcus Lee, known for uncovering long-buried corruption. Her fingers hovered above the send button, then typed, "Subject: Evidence of missing, 830K from 1,000, 984 bust body. Marcus, I work at Lafayette Auto Salvage. Today I uncovered a Polaroid and envelope hidden in the trunk of an old police cruiser Unit 413 from a 1,984 heroin raid. The photo shows officers counting cash. The accompanying note reads, "They kept the cash. I kept this." All evidence is sealed and logged under chain of custody protocol. I believe this could reopen an almost 4-decade-old discrepancy. Please let me know how you'd advise proceeding." She paused, reread each word for clarity and restraint, then clicked send. Outside, the summer heat pressed against the tin siding of the office. Elise leaned back in her chair, the whir of ceiling fans filling the silence. Her heart pounded as she considered the implications: a direct challenge to the official record, a photograph that disproved a clerical error, and a confession penned in red that dared any institution to look back. As the afternoon light shifted, casting slanted beams across her desk, the message hit her inbox with Marcus's auto-reply: "Received. On my way." In that instant, Elise understood she'd crossed from observer to participant in a story that began under cover of night and now refused to stay in the dark. June 7, 2023, 10:45 a.m. Marcus Lee pulled into the gravel drive of Lafayette Auto Salvage in an unmarked sedan, its windows tinted against the heat. He ducked under the low awning of the yard office, camera bag slung over one shoulder and a slim laptop case in the other. Elise met him at the door, guiding him inside the cramped, air-conditioned room where yellowing regulation posters hung alongside shelf-stacked brake rotors. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice steady but eyes bright with urgency. On her desk sat the sealed wooden crate stamped Evidence, Unit 413, and the digital camera tethered to her laptop. Marcus placed his bag down and flipped open his computer as Elise carefully removed the tamper evidence seal and lifted the crate lid. Inside lay the evidence bag, the brittle envelope, and the Polaroid wrapped in wax paper. He donned nitrile gloves and extracted the photo, holding it by its edges. Under his desk lamp, the glossy surface revealed every fingerprint ridge and moisture stain. The image showed 3 uniformed officers leaning into Unit 413's trunk, their white gloves stark against the bundled cash. Behind them, a flashlight's beam cut through the trunk's darkness, illuminating rows of rubber-banded stacks. The red timestamp May 12, 84, 3:29. Amois printed in a font used on Polaroid 600 film, a detail Marcus noted with a click of his pen. "This is exactly what it appears to be," he murmured, eyes flicking between the photo and the envelope's red ink message. "They kept the cash. I kept this. We have a confession and a primary visual record. Forensics can confirm the film type, chemical aging, even estimate when it was processed." Elise leaned forward. "I need to know, how do we prove this matches the missing 830, and who wrote the note?" Marcus scrolled through his FOIA draft on screen. First step, confirm departmental logs from '84, especially evidence intake sheets. Then we cross-reference retirement records for anyone with the handwriting style hand-slanted capitals, red ink who was on the May 12 shift, and the timestamp. Production records show Polaroid 600 film with red print was sold only through certain suppliers in Louisiana that year. He plugged the Polaroid into a high-resolution scanner and opened image analysis software. As the scanning light swept the photograph's surface, a pale rectangle where the wax paper once lay became visible in ultraviolet glow, hinting at adhesive residue patterns. Marcus pointed to faint impressions in the trunk's metal, 3 parallel scratch marks matching the Polaroid's width. "This sat here untouched since '84, he said. Elise exhaled. "Every detail reinforces its authenticity." He nodded, pausing. "I'll file FOIA requests today. We'll need precinct logs, property room manifests, and any unredacted internal affairs memos. Then I'll reach out to a handwriting analyst for the note and a photo forensics expert for the film." Outside, the salvage yard breeze rattled the window frame. Inside, the Polaroid lay under glass, frozen in time but alive in its implications, a silent witness demanding answers. As Marcus hit send on the FOIA emails, Elise watched the outbox count climb. Nearly 40 years of silence had shattered in that moment, and every unanswered question would soon be illuminated under the glare of renewed scrutiny. June 8, 2023, 9:02 a.m. At the downtown archives, Marcus Lee stepped into a cavern of musty shelves and steel lockers. The municipal records room hummed with air conditioning that fought against years of paper degradation. He joined archivist Elena Torres at a terminal where rows of digitized microfilm awaited his query. "Case 84-237, he typed. The screen flickered to life. "Arrest reports, inventory logs, property room manifests." Torres loaded the first real evidence intake, May 1984, and began scrolling. Each entry bore a date stamp and officer signature. Marcus compared Thornton's neat cursive on the radio log slip with the evidence room slip that Jennings had corrected. They found it easily. May 12, 1984, evidence received item, cash, 70, 0. Officer's signature, Paula Jennings. No mention of the original, 900, 0. They marked the entry and moved to the next reel, Internal Affairs Correspondence. The folder was scant, a single memo referencing clerical discrepancy, but no follow-up investigation. Torres pulled another file labeled Fleet Disposal Services Transfer, 1985. Marcus noted the VIN and sale date to JM Auctions. "This confirms the chain of custody right through decommissioning," he said, tapping his stylus against the screen. They switched to paper archives yellowed binders in a climate-controlled cabinet. Marcus leafed through 2 volumes of the precinct's daily logs. On May 12, his eyes fixed on the notation at 3:30 a.m. Confirmed recovery of suspected heroin. Cash count deferred to evidence room. Transported to vault. No amount specified. Next to it, scrawled in pencil, "See evidence intake log." The pencil scribble matched the handwriting on the clerical corrections envelope Ron Duval had shown him. Marcus photographed the pages and moved on to personnel files. He extracted redacted PDFs of retirement dates and service records for Thornton, McKinney, and Santiago. He cross-referenced each with fingerprint and glove use protocols. Only one served in the evidence unit beyond May 1984. Sergeant Jennings, who retired in 1992. Jennings had both motive and opportunity, he muttered. She handled the intake slip and signed off on the decommission. Torres pointed to her signature in the internal affairs memo, the same block letters instructing fields to amend the amount. They compiled a timeline. Raid at 3:29 a.m. Jennings correction at 9:17 a.m. Decommission notice in 1985, transfer to fleet disposal in August 85. Through each stage, the 900 existed only in Thornton's radio log, newspaper reports, and that buried Polaroid. By late afternoon, Marcus had filled half a legal pad with notes. He sent encrypted copies of the digital scans to a forensics lab, requesting handwriting analysis on the red ink note and chemical dating on the tape adhesive. Outside, the archives closed for the day. Marcus stepped into the sun, evidence files in hand, his mind racing. Nearly 40 years of bureaucracy, oversight, and silence lay exposed on those pages. Yet the final proof etched in red ink and captured on Polaroid film awaited only the lab's confirmation. In that convergence of paper and photograph, the truth pulsed, ready to emerge from the shadows. June 9, 2023, 10:00 a.m. In a sunlit conference room at Lee, Ramirez Legal Associates, attorney Julia Kim spread out stacks of statutes, case law volumes, and printed FOIA responses before Elise Bernard and Marcus Lee. The air smelled of fresh coffee and paper in ambience that felt distant from the diesel tang of the salvage yard, but equally charged with stakes. Under Louisiana law, Kim began, tapping a highlighter against Law Reverend Stat. Section 15, 541, theft of public funds by a public employee carries a 3-year prosecutorial window from the date of the offense. That expired in May 1987. On the shelf behind her perched battered law, treatises dating to the 1980s. She pulled one down and flipped to a chapter on malfeasance and misfeasance in office. Elise exchanged a glance with Marcus. He nodded encouragingly. "So, criminal charges are off the table?" Elise's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly around her water glass. Kim closed the book and folded her hands. Practically speaking, yes. Beyond the statute of limitations, evidence chain gaps in decades-old cases often lead to dismissal. Witnesses retire, memories fade, records degrade. Even with your Polaroid and envelope, a DA would likely decline prosecution. She placed another volume on the table, this one on civil remedies. However, Kim continued, there's a civil path. Unjust enrichment claims against the estate of any deceased officer or a wrongful taking suit by the city against surviving participants. The burden of proof is lower preponderance of evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt, and the civil statute has a 10-year window from discovery of the concealed asset. Marcus leaned forward. Discovery being now, in 2023. Precisely, Kim affirmed. Since this evidence only surfaced this year, the clock resets. Families of the original suspects, Walker, Patton, Alvarez, could file for damages, or the city could pursue recovery. She tapped La. Civ Code Art. 3494. An obligee has 10 years from the day the thing is discovered to demand restitution. The ripple of potential consequences hovered in the room. Elise traced the statute with her fingertip, imagining headlines about civil suits reopening a 4-decade-old mystery. What about public records requests? Marcus asked. Is there any recourse to compel more transparency? Kim nodded, pulling up a FOIA decision on her laptop. Courts have ordered additional disclosures when new evidence emerges, especially under the public interest exception. You can petition a judge to unseal internal affairs files tied to Case 84-237. That may reveal who drafted the red ink note and, perhaps, who profited. Elise exhaled. So even if no one goes to jail, someone could pay damages, and the record would be corrected. Julia smiled. And importantly, the public record would reflect what you found: no more clerical euphemisms. Unit 413's legacy would be set right, as the morning sun angled through Venetian blinds. Their strategy crystallized. A civil suit to restore truth, FOIA petitions to pry open internal files, and media pressure to hold power to account. In that convergence of law and journalism, silence would no longer be an option. The statute of limitations may have expired on criminal charges, but the statute of discovery had just begun its clock, ticking toward restitution, accountability, and the public reckoning long overdue. July 15, 2023, 2:17 p.m. The address led them down a narrow country road west of the city, past peeling mailboxes and fields of summer corn swaying in the haze. Marcus Lee sat beside Elise Bernard in the rented sedan, GPS pinpointing the residence of retired officer Raul Santiago, 70, living under his full name with a modest pension. Elise rang the doorbell of the single-story ranch house. The chime echoed through a quiet hallway. Inside, Santiago answered the door with cautious politeness, framed by a floral print kitchen curtain and the scent of brewing coffee. He wore a short-sleeved polo and knit cap, his shoulders slightly stooped with age. "Mr. Santiago," Marcus began, extending a reporter's ID. "I'm Marcus Lee, investigative journalist. This is Elise Bernard. We came about the evidence found in Unit 413's trunk." Santiago's eyes flicked toward the passenger seat, where a discreet evidence crate rested. He straightened, voice even. "I don't know what you think is there, but I've said everything about that night back in '84. Elise produced the Polaroid in its sealed bag, placing it gently on a side table. Santiago's gaze hardened as he recognized the timestamp and the blue-white paint of the cruiser. He did not reach for it. "You were one of the 3 officers photographed counting cash," Marcus said. "Your gloves, your badge number, everything matches precinct records." Santiago sipped his coffee, lips pressed thin. "That was procedure," he replied. "Counting evidence before sealing it. I don't recall any missing money." His eyes darted toward a framed family photo on the wall, 2 grandchildren, smiling beneath his retired badge, pinned in a shadow box. Elise held up the envelope's red ink message. "Who wrote this?" "They kept the cash. I kept this." He set his cup down and turned away, voice softening. "I've lived a quiet life since then. I buried everything. I don't want to drag my grandchildren into a story that's old news." Marcus placed a hand on the table. "This isn't just old news. If the money went missing..." Santiago's knuckles whitened around his mug. "I don't know anything about missing money. My part ended when I locked the vault door." He took a deliberate breath. "You want answers? Talk to Sergeant Jennings. She managed evidence. I never saw another cent." Elise pressed on. "Records show you stayed on the evidence unit through '85. You signed off on decommissioned paperwork." His jaw clenched. He set down the mug with a thud. "Paperwork isn't proof of theft. I did my duty. If someone else crossed a line, that's between them and their conscience." Silence filled the room, punctuated by the hum of a ceiling fan. Marcus closed his notebook. "We'll report exactly what you've told us." Santiago nodded, expression unreadable. "That's your right." He gestured toward the door. I'm done here. Outside, the July sun bore down as Elise and Marcus walked back to the car. No confession, no leads on the note's author, only a wall of silent denial. Yet even in his refusal to speak, Santiago's presence confirmed one truth. Some witnesses guard their secrets more fiercely than others, and those who remain alive can choose stillness over disclosure. August 1, 2023, 3:0 p.m. A quiet booth in the corner of Crescent Cafe, its window framing a slow drip of late afternoon sunlight, became the stage for the long-awaited sit-down. Elise Bernard and Marcus Lee arrived first, each with a file of scanned documents and printed photographs. Moments later, Sergeant Paula Jennings, retired since 1992, entered with measured steps, folding herself into the opposite seat. Her shoulders were straight, hands clasped around a porcelain teacup. Marcus slid the sealed Polaroid image across the table. Jennings's eyes narrowed as she recognized the grainy print. 3 officers in crisp uniforms, gloved hands counting bundles of cash in the trunk of Unit 413. The red timestamp May 12, 84, 3:29 am gleamed in the photograph's corner. "I haven't seen that in decades," Jennings said softly, voice steady. She settled the teacup on its saucer and studied the image over the rim. Procedure was to count everything before sealing it. "We never questioned the amount." Elise unfolded a yellowed photocopy of the original evidence intake slip. "Cash, 900, 0. Next to it, the amended slip, 70, 0. Signed in Jennings's block letters. Jennings pressed her fingertips to her forehead. "Clerical adjustment," she repeated. "The ledger balance didn't match the vault deposit. I asked for correction." Marcus leaned forward. "Correction, but who ordered it? Your memo instructed Fields to reduce the count. That envelope, which Ron Duval saved it, carried your initials." He tapped the scanned memo. "See clerical error, PJ." Jennings glanced away, the cafe's din filling the pause. "I was following protocol," she said, tone cool. "I called it in, closed the loop. If there was an overage, it was above my pay grade." Elise showed her the red ink note. "They kept the cash, I kept this. Do you recognize the handwriting?" she asked. Jennings's jaw tightened. She shook her head. "I used black ink for everything. No officer wrote in red. That notey, I never saw it until you showed me." Marcus spread out the FOIA printouts, the internal affairs memo, retirement records, evidence vault logs. "Your signatures here on the decommission order, your note on the clerical envelope, and your approval on the transfer. You had every opportunity to see the full count." Jennings' composure flickered. She folded her arms, gaze dropping to the tabletop. "I did my duty," she whispered. After a breath, she looked up, eyes glossy. "Maybe I should have asked harder questions. But I trusted Thornton, Santiago, McKinney. We were a team." Elise pressed gently. "A team that reported 900, 0 only to settle for 70, 0. Jennings' lips parted as though to speak, then closed without sound. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I was new to the evidence unit," she said. "I handled hundreds of cases. If the system failed, I failed with it." Her voice cracked, and for a fleeting second, she looked like the haunted clerk in Ron Duval's memories. Marcus reached into his bag for a recorder. "Is there anything else you can tell us? A name? A conversation? Anything that explains the missing 830, 0? Jennings shook her head. "I don't know who wrote the note. I don't know where the money went. And I forgive myself by believing I did everything I could." The afternoon light shifted across her face, highlighting lines etched by decades of silence. In that moment, her denial and her equivocation felt intertwined, an unspoken admission that even the most by-the-book officer could be complicit in a quiet cover-up. Jennings rose, smoothing her blouse. "I'm sorry," she said, voice small. "I wish I had more." Outside the cafe, Elise and Marcus watched her walk away, knowing the thread of confession had frayed, but not broken, and that the final unraveling still lay ahead. September 12, 2023, 11:00 a.m. By late summer, the Polaroid and red ink confession had become a catalyst, rippling through families, courtrooms, and newsrooms alike. In a modest living room on Woodland Avenue, the same block where the original raid occurred, Margaret Alvarez sifted through yellowed legal correspondence. Her brother, Luis, had served a 5-year sentence based in part on that amended 70-0 cash count. Now she held a printout of Marcus Lee's exposé in her hands. $830K vanished from evidence, photo proves it. Margaret's eyes welled at the thought of her brother's lost years. She dialed a long-forgotten attorney who'd once handled an appeal. Within hours, a small legal team filed a notice of intent for a wrongful conviction suit under the Civil Discovery Rule statute. Across town, Eddie Patton's widow, Carla, first learned of the story on a local radio program. The host spoke of a rusted cruiser in a junkyard with the power to rewrite lives, and signs of protest sprouted outside the courthouse. Homemade placards reading, "Justice delayed is justice denied." Meanwhile, the city's mayor convened a special panel to review the Narcotics Division's archives. Community leaders, clergy, and retired judges sat side by side, poring over evidence room logs and FOIA transcripts projected on a courtroom screen. Reverend James Holloway cleared his throat at the lectern. "For decades, we trusted our protectors," he said. "Now we must reckon with the silence that let integrity corrode." His words echoed down the marble halls, carried by reporters' microphones. The local NAACP chapter organized a commemorative rally outside police headquarters on September 20. 12 family members of the 3 original defendants stood beneath a banner, "Truth won't be bailed out." Detective Ron Duvalno, 80, spoke into the glare of camera lights. He recounted the night of the raid, his voice steady despite the years. "Paperwork covered the money," he said. "But you can't cover a Polaroid." He raised a framed enlargement of the photo overhead, and cameras flashed as applause broke the morning stillness. On public radio, investigative journalists traced the flow of funds through now-defunct shell companies and private auction records. Financial experts explained how 830, 0 in 1,984 equated to over $2.4 million today. Adjusted for inflation, money that could have paid tens of thousands in restitution and court costs for wrongfully convicted men. By month's end, the mayor signed an executive order to publish a full audit of every evidence room discrepancy since 1975. The Narcotics Division's commander issued a public apology for failures of oversight, and the city council allocated funds for an annual cold case review board. In homes, offices, and public forums, the rusted cruiser's secret had ignited a reckoning. Silence gave way to testimony, cover-ups to public records. Unit 413's battered trunk had held more than cachette bore witness to a breach of trust. And in the echo of that revelation, a community found a fragile, renewed faith in the promise of accountability. October 5, 2023, 2:30 p.m. In the hushed galleries of the City History Museum, a new exhibit stood beneath soft spotlights. Evidence Unseen. The story of Unit 413. Glass cases displayed archived documents, Thornton's radio log, Jennings's clerical correction envelope, and the original Polaroid encased in an acid-free frame. Visitors drifted slowly past, reading on-screen text overlays that traced the cruiser's journey from raid to junkyard and finally to reckoning. At the front of the exhibit, Elise Bernard stood beside Marcus Lee and museum curator Dr. Amara Desai. Each held a corner of a faded envelope, the red ink confession now mounted for public viewing. Guests murmured as Elise lifted the sealed Polaroid into its display case, the timestamp May 12, 84, 3:29. "I'm hovering like a frozen heartbeat beneath the glass." Dr. Desai cleared her throat. Today, we honor the persistence of one mechanic's curiosity, an investigative team's dedication, and a community's demand for truth. This photograph, a simple Polaroid, became the catalyst for justice long overdue. Her words floated through the gallery, carried by hushed applause. Elise's gaze lingered on the image, 3 officers counting cash in a trunk that would carry only silence for 39 years. She traced the bundles in her mind, remembering the dusty air of the salvage yard and the hollow thud as she first peeled back the lining. The weight of that moment still settled in her chest, an unspoken bond between past and present. Visitors clustered around a touchscreen kiosk where digital facsimiles of archival files revealed the newspaper headlines, FOIA responses, and court filings that followed the exhibit's founding discovery. A video loop showed interviews with Ron Duvall, the families of Walker, Patton, and Alvarez, and finally footage of Sergeant Jennings' apology to the city council. Each testimony wove into a tapestry of confession, accountability, and, ultimately, restitution. A family approached 2 children, clutching notebooks, their mother pointing to the display. "That's the photo Grandma showed us," one child whispered. Elise smiled, recalling messages from the original defendants' families' letters of thanks for restoring their loved ones' stories. The civil suits had settled that summer. A combined restitution fund, established in the victims' names, scholarships in criminal justice ethics, and the creation of an annual review board to prevent future clerical oversights from becoming cover-ups. As the exhibit's opening wound down, Elise stepped aside, letting others view the artifacts. The afternoon sun filtered through high windows, casting angular light across the Polaroid. In that shaft of brightness, the dust motes danced a reminder that even the smallest photograph can scatter shadows. In the silent beat that followed, Elise placed a hand on the glass case. The rusted cruiser no longer sat in a junkyard. Its truth lived here, accessible to all who sought it. Quiet vindication, she thought, is not a roar but the steady turning of pages from secrecy to clarity. And in these galleries, the story of Unit 413 would endure an unbroken line from misfiled evidence to collective reckoning, a testament to the persistence of truth,